I somehow read 16 books this month because I have such a giant brain. It's huge. That's why my tits are so big. It had to seep into somewhere. My name is Chelsea. You can find me at Cowboy Chels on all forms of social media. I like talking about books and makeup and lifestyle, so if that interests you, check it out. It is May 25th and this is my April wrap up. I have been traveling and very, very busy with work. I'm consistently having issues with my work-life balance, but that sucks because I really have missed making videos like this and I hope to be a bit more regular with it. I was super behind on my reading goal, so I asked around and people suggested reading novellas and poetry, and it was lovely. I had so much fun. Let's get started. Weyward by Emilia Hart. This is a magical realism book that focuses on a lineage of women, the Weyward women, who have a connection to the earth around them. It is magic, but it's like my favorite kind of magic to read about, where it's that folksy connection to that around you kind of magic. They're all in the UK. One of the Weyward women is in the 1600s, where she is being tried for witchcraft. One is a teen girl living in her oppressive, wealthy family home during World War II, and the third is a modern woman escaping an abusive relationship. This is one of those books where it's so bothersome when you recommend something and all the comments are like, does it have spice? Does it have spice? I love reading spice as much as the next person, but when you allow it to dictate what you do and don't read, I feel like it gives you such a disservice. This is a wonderful book and it has no romance. I would say check out the trigger warnings on Storygraph. I was gripped by this book in a really rare way for me. It reminded me of like growing up and staying up reading underneath the covers all night long. It's also, since it's the 3 point of views of each woman, it has that perfect thing where when you get to the end of a chapter, you're bummed out because you want to stay with that person's story, but then the next person, you want to stay with them, and so on and so forth, which is like, to me, such a telltale sign, different point of views being essential to a story. I rated this 4.5 stars. Disfigured on fairy tales, disability, and making space. This book fits so perfectly into the niche of nonfiction that I love. It's a story about folklore and disability analyzed by the author Amanda Leduc, who has cerebral palsy. I also liked how within the beginning of the book, Leduc tells you exactly what to expect from it. It's not going through different experience of disability from a bunch of different people. It's really sticking to her story with like a few anecdotes from others. I found it extremely hopeful and enchanting. I rated it 4 out of 5 stars. The Night Swim by Rachel Crowell. A true crime podcast host is investigating an extremely publicized rape trial in a small town. While she's staying there, she's contacted by a woman whose older sister died in that town decades prior. It was ruled as an accidental drowning, but her sister is convinced it was a murder. The host tries to balance both investigations and the way that they intertwine with themselves. I am a little torn on this one. Here's a little spoiler, so skip like 30 seconds if you plan on reading this. I did see the plot twist coming and I thought to myself, no, certainly not. That would center the rape as a form of karmic retribution rather than just what happened to this girl. But she did. She did do that. I used to listen to true crime in my late teens, and it got to the point where every time I would have it on in the car, I would just start sobbing, thinking about the victim and the implications of their family. Particularly, I would think like, what if I was listening to so-and-so and it would be like someone in my family's murder, this fucking podcast. So I stopped listening to true crime, but I did kind of miss the narrative details because, I mean, we are fundamentally biologically nosy creatures. There is a reason that true crime is so alluring to so many people. So to get away from this aspect of it, every once in a while I'll listen to a thriller that's from the perspective of a podcast host, like Sadie by Courtney Summers, for example. I loved Sadie. I think it was a breakout hit if I remember correctly, and I think that it does that niche genre very, very well. All that being said, I thought this was kind of lackluster. I gave it a 2 out of 5 stars. The Afrominimalist's Guide to Living with Less by Christine Platt. I was drawn to this book by the recommendation that it was an intersectional take on minimalism, and it addresses the commodity that white wealthy people have made minimalism into being. It was really good. It's just that in this exact moment in my life, I'm kind of looking for that balance between consumerism and comfortable, cozy life. But every, couple of months I get the bug to reduce my belongings. So next time that I do have that bug, I'll listen to it and I'm sure that I'll get a lot out of it. I rated it 3.5 out of 5 stars. An Elderly Lady is Up to No Good by Helene Tursten. This is a short little novella that is perfect if you like something a little kooky and if you need to bump up your reading list for your annual goal. I rated it 3 out of 5 stars. You've Reached Sam by Dustin Thao. This was the first YA book that I had read in quite a while, so I struggled with the pacing kind of due to that in a very YA way. It follows a teenage girl who is working through her grief after her boyfriend dies in an accident that she considers to be her fault. One day when she's missing her boyfriend, she calls his cell phone and he picks up. They keep talking, and after that, every time she calls, he picks up despite the fact that he is very much dead. She starts to ignore her real life in favor of this surreal pseudo life with him on the phone. I loved aspects of this. I felt like the location was so gorgeous. Her memories with him and the cherry blossoms blooming, the small town atmosphere, her job at a bookstore, they were all very lovely to read about. I especially loved the surreal moments that were kind of balanced between a dream and a memory. It's not something that I would necessarily recommend to my friends. If you're a big YA reader or you're someone who is dealing with grief, I would recommend it, but just typically I would say 3 out of 5 stars. I feel like I've been talking for so long, and after I edit all of this, it really will just be like 5 minutes and a lot of books to get through, but that's how I feel. A Court of Silver Flames by Sarah J Maas. I started this book before the sharing of information regarding how Sarah J Maas used Breonna Taylor's death to promote the cover reveal of this book. It's one of those things that was just so tone deaf, and I don't think it was done with malicious intent, but the act of leaving it up this entire time and never apologizing for the harm that it caused, that Black fan said directly that it was upsetting. I found that very disappointing. I enjoy Sarah J Maas's books, but I won't be promoting or discussing her works going forward on this channel unless things change. Love on the Brain by Ali Hazelwood. Ali Hazelwood used to be a Raylo fanfic writer, and what of it? I know what she's doing. She has a niche, small little bitches with big old guys who are mean to them, and then they find out that they've actually been pining for him this whole time. She does it, and she does it well. This book is about a neuroscientist named B who works at NASA. She just got the job there, and she's roadblocked by this guy that she went to grad school, I think it was, with, and he hated her at the time, and it's clear to her that he hates her now. It is that quintessential grumpy sunshine miscommunication trope. And I was at a beach house and I was slugging through a fantasy and I was like, this sucks. I need Ali Hazelwood. Downloaded it to my Kindle, had a great time. It was a blast. And yet 3.5, maybe 4 out of 5 stars. I think that ice cream truck is going around if you can hear it. A Taste for Poison, 11 Deadly Molecules and the Killers Who Used Them by Neil Bradbury. It was very scientific. I liked the bits where I learned things. The title is very straightforward with what it's about. I was expecting it to be all women. I don't know why. Just the cliche of poisoning, I suppose, but it was very much not. It was pretty balanced. The discussions of each murder were done very respectfully, and it really was focused on like every little minute detail of the molecules of the poison. However, if you were like, I would love a dark nonfiction book to read, I would instead suggest Stiff by Mary Roach. I'm gonna give this 2.5 out of 5 stars. I feel like I'm rating things really lowly, but it's just how I felt on the inside. Short Talks by Anne Carson. I loved this. I think it's perfect for those who are either getting into poetry for the first time or getting back into poetry. It's a really quick read, and yet a lot of the poems have kind of stuck with me and I find myself thinking about them. 5 out of 5 stars. Paul Temple and the Spencer Affair by Frances Durbage. I don't know where this case is or even really where the other cassette. Whenever I'm filming my makeup for TikTok or Instagram, I always put in these little like cozy mystery audiobooks. And with the Paul Temple ones, you've listened to one, you've listened to them all, but I still enjoy all of them. Paul Temple, a private investigator, is helping different detectives across the UK from 1930 to the 1960s. Him and his cool wife solve mysteries You get it. The Fraud Squad by Kyla Zhao. I was drawn to this when I saw a comparison to Gossip Girl. However, I would pin it closer to Devil Wears Prada. I find elite life and other countries very interesting. I would read a million books about that experience. Any country, any kind of rich bitch, I'm looking forward to it. This follows a working class young woman who lives with her struggling widowed mother in Singapore. She works with a rich Nepo baby at her PR firm. They become fast friends through shenanigans. They pair up with the coolest, hottest bachelor in Singapore. They group up to try to trick the elite class into thinking that the main character is one of them, that she's a socialite. I would have loved this so much more if it didn't have the romance subplot. I thought it was really weak. If it was just like juicy, high-class gossip and shopping, I would have loved it to bits. Every time the male lead came onto the page, I was just like, oh. In books like these, by the end of it, I want the main character to either be a full-fledged villain, like extremely vain, extremely materialistic, or I want them to have experienced a full character arc. Unfortunately for this, I felt like she was pretty much the same as she started. I rated it 3 out of 5 stars, and those 3 stars are like purely the hoot and holler I had reading like brand names and about the magazines. If it didn't have that, it would have been 1 or 2 stars. Always the Almost by Edward Underhill. Isn't this cover so pretty? I read this for the Trans Rights Readathon and it was very lovely. By that time, I had already read a few YA books for this month, so it was much easier to get into in my opinion. It's great if you want something slice of trans life. Always the Almost is about a teenage boy named Miles who is a competitive pianist. He had transitioned a few months prior and his football jock boyfriend broke up with him because he was not gay. Miles makes it his New Year's resolution to get the football boyfriend back. However, piano and a new boy at school might be getting in the way of that. I rated it 4 out of 5 stars. And this is a debut. I'm looking forward to seeing what he does next. This book is one of my favorites of the month, if not my favorite. It's Burn Down, Rise Up by Vincent Tirado. This is about a group of high schoolers who live in the Bronx, and they all used to be very close friends until, you know, growing up happened. They all kind of spread out. When one of their cousins goes missing, the grief of it brings all of them kind of back together. And it turns out a lot of kids have been going missing from the Bronx lately, and the police are at a loss. The group figures out that everyone has been going missing while playing this urban legend game that is all over the internet. It's like a creepypasta game, and people around the world are sharing their experiences where they play the game and they enter this like mirrored place of their city, and it's during whatever impacted their city the most. I think it might be what impacted death the most. It's a little fuzzy there, but some of things mentioned are people getting trapped in the Blitz in England or the Paris catacombs. For them, it's the Bronx burnings. I so badly wish this was a series. I would read every single one of them. It's horror, it's creepy, it has history. I would gobble it all up. There are some things that brought it down that are just like little moments that I found exasperating, like the cliche high school essay tie-in that's so perfectly themed for what they're dealing with. I did find the main characters' relationships with her parents to be really interesting and very nuanced. I rated it 4.5 out of 5 stars. Last but not least, thank you for sticking with me. The Black Guy Dies First, Black Horse Cinema from Fodder to Oscar by Robin R. Means Coleman and Mark H. Harris. Nonfiction was very popular for me this month. As you may know, I am a huge fan of horror, and I had to pick this up when I saw it at a bookstore. The authors examine the history and context of Black cinema by going through negative tropes, so each chapter is like a negative trope and they discuss it and then cite a bunch of movies that it is in. And then as you get further in the book, they focus on movies written and directed by Black creatives and the way that the Black experience is interwoven into the storyline. One of my absolute favorite franchises, the Purge series, had its like own chapter, and it was just so cool to hear about, especially because there's so many things that you just don't think about when watching a movie in regards to what's beyond the scenes. When I'm watching watching a movie that comes out like in the last 5 years or so, I'm not thinking of the historical tie-ins. For example, is the Candyman franchise, so like all the remakes of it and kind of the context of them. Anyway, I recommend reading the book instead of listening to the audiobook because I feel like the lists would be more effective that way. 4 out of 5 stars. Thank you so much for spending this time with me. I had a great time reading and writing it all down so I could tell you about it. If you like this type of video, please subscribe. I've got a few more of these book themed videos cooking, so including reading your recommendations that people suggested on Instagram, and also of course my May wrap up, which it is the 25th. Thank you, bye.